Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the place where we turn complex research into applicable wisdom for your life. Let's be honest, modern existence often feels like an involuntary high-speed train ride. You're constantly accelerating, watching the scenery blur past, but rarely do you feel like you have your hand on the throttle. We are swimming in the sea of low-level anxiety, aren't we? Often punctuated by sudden bursts of stress, chasing an ever-receding horizon of having it all or maybe being perfect. It's exhausting, frankly, and it leaves so many of us feeling adrift, just going through the motions, yet profoundly empty sometimes. Our mission today is to equip you, the listener, with a robust roadmap. We are here for the person striving for mental clarity, for true emotional balance, and for that feeling of being genuinely purposeful, that sense of feeling truly alive without adding more informational clutter to your already full plate. We're building a practical framework for profound purpose.
And to build that framework, we've gone deep into some truly integrated source material. We are not just focusing on one discipline here. We are pulling together insights from timeless ancient wisdom, specifically Stoicism and Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, and marrying them with the latest evidence-based interventions from positive psychology, and also the transformative power of personal narrative, drawing from therapeutic practice.
Okay, so a real synthesis then.
Exactly. The goal isn't just to feel better for a day. The ultimate aim of this deep dive is to help you consciously shift your operational mode. We want to move you from what we might call a reactive being, someone kind of lost in those habituated response patterns, simply being pulled around by, let's say, the dream of low awareness.
Reactive, yeah, I get that. Just reacting to whatever happens.
To becoming a conscious being. A conscious being is anchored, possessing the intelligence, and most importantly, the inner freedom to choose how they respond, regardless of the level of external chaos.
That concept of inner freedom, that really resonates because it speaks to agency, the thing we often feel we lose first when life gets overwhelming. Okay, let's unpack this. We begin not with the how-to list or with a checklist of actions, but with the fundamental philosophical underpinning, the attitude we bring to life, and the foundational search for meaning itself.
Right. To truly anchor ourselves in resilience, we have to start with the work of Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist. His landmark work, Man's Search for Meaning, is it's an inescapable text on human psychological survival. What makes it so profound is that it's not theoretical. It was forged directly in the crucible of his experience as a prisoner in 4 different Nazi concentration camps during World War II. Horrific circumstances.
So this wasn't armchair philosophy. This was lived experience at the absolute extreme.
Absolutely. Frankl had this unique perspective. He wasn't just enduring. He was observing. He was actively trying to identify what distinguished the prisoners who survived, not just physically but mentally, from those who simply gave up. His observation was chillingly simple, really. Those who survived tended to have a purpose that extended beyond their immediate suffering. They had a why.
I have a why?
Yeah, they had a future task, maybe a beloved person to reconnect with, or even a profound realization that their suffering itself held a potential meaning. Something to hold on to.
So the central assertion, the foundation of all his work, is that finding life's purpose or worth is absolutely essential. It's not a luxury for psychological well-being. It's actually a prerequisite for survival.
Precisely. And this observation led him to develop his own school of thought. Logotherapy. The name itself comes from the Greek word logos, which means meaning. Logotherapy centers entirely on the pursuit of meaning as the primary motivational force in life.
That's a critical philosophical distinction, isn't it? Because he was consciously pushing back against the foundational ideas of his predecessors, like Freud and Adler. Can you elaborate on why this will to meaning is so different from what came before?
Yes, definitely. Sigmund Freud emphasized what he called the will to pleasure. The basic idea that human behavior is primarily driven by the desire to satisfy instincts, especially sexual and aggressive, drives, the pleasure principle. Alfred Adler, another major figure, focused on the will to power, this striving for superiority, for recognition, overcoming feelings of inferiority.
Okay, pleasure and power, pretty dominant ideas.
Very. But Frankl argued that these were, in a sense, secondary drives. He saw people, even in the most deprived environments imaginable, sacrificing pleasure, sacrificing status for some greater cause. For Frankl, we are fundamentally driven to seek significance, to feel that our existence matters, that we have a purpose to fulfill, even if that purpose is just bearing witness to the truth or holding on to dignity.
So it's this search for significance, not hedonism or dominance, that's the deepest human motivation.
That was his core assertion. And if that motivation is thwarted, if people feel meaningless, The results can be psychologically devastating.
You mentioned that Frankl identified 3 core avenues through which meaning can be found, even when the external world is collapsing. These sound crucial for anyone feeling lost today.
They are, I think, universally applicable. First, meaning is found through creativity and purposeful work.
Okay, but does that mean you have to be an artist or something?
Not necessarily artistic creativity. It means contributing something of value to the world, making a difference through your actions or your work. For Frankl himself, it was his determination to survive and eventually write down his psychological findings. That was a form of contribution, of creation that gave his suffering a future purpose.
Right, it gave him a reason to keep going.
Exactly. Second, meaning is found through love and the experience of value. This involves deeply connecting with and appreciating another human being, sometimes just through memory. Frankl often drew strength from the image of his wife, even when he didn't know she was alive. The love itself transcended the physical presence.
Wow.
It proved for him that true value and meaning are internal, spiritual almost, not dependent on external reality always being pleasant.
Okay, and the third one, you said it was the most challenging.
Yes, the third is finding meaning through the courage to face unavoidable suffering. This is the profound insight that if we cannot change the situation, if the suffering is truly unavoidable, we are then challenged to change ourselves, to find meaning in the way we choose to carry that burden.
That third point often gets glossed over, I think, finding meaning in suffering. Can you give us maybe a more modern analogy to illustrate that transformative power, something relatable?
Certainly. Think about, say, job stress. If you are enduring grueling hours and intense high-pressure responsibilities aimlessly, without a clear vision of why, that suffering is just raw, soul-crushing pain.
Yeah, burnout city.
Leads to burnout, cynicism, because it lacks meaning. However, if you're enduring that same grueling stress because you know it is necessary to complete, say, a difficult medical degree that will allow you to save lives.
Okay.
Or maybe you're enduring it to secure the financial stability your family desperately needs. Suddenly, the suffering changes its character. It ceases to be just suffering and becomes purposeful sacrifice. The energy you expend is infused with worth, making it infinitely more bearable and eventually transformative.
It's the why again, the purpose behind the pain.
Precisely. And this is where the philosophical rubber meets the road, where Frankl's insight becomes a practical tool. The absolute importance of attitude. If everything is taken away, wealth, health, freedom, what remains is the choice of how you respond internally.
That's the ultimate act of internal liberation, isn't it? He argued that external circumstances are uncontrollable, but the freedom to choose our attitude remains inviolable.
Yes, and this insight, gleaned from the darkest human experience, is the core of mental resilience. To quote him directly, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way.
If you truly internalize that quote, wow, the world changes. It means no external force, no amount of hardship can truly enslave your spirit because the quality of your experience is determined by your internal response. But, and this is where I think many listeners might struggle, where's the boundary? How do you distinguish between this powerful acceptance, amor fati, which we'll get into later, and just simple passivity in the face of injustice? That feels like a fine line.
It's an essential question, and Frankl definitely addressed it. The challenge to change ourselves only arises when the situation is absolutely unchangeable. Keyword, unavoidable. If the suffering is remediable, if something can be done, Frankl would insist on creative action, using our will to meaning to change the situation, that first path we talked about.
Okay, so it's not about giving up if change is possible.
Not at all. It's the moment we determine that external change is impossible, say, facing an incurable disease or an irrevocable loss. That is the precise moment the value shifts. We move from trying to change the environment to embracing the personal, internal, and spiritual growth that comes from our unique, dignified response to that which cannot be avoided. It's an act of defiance through inner freedom, not surrender.
Defiance through inner freedom, I like that. And when people fail to find or embrace this purpose, they fall into that state. Frankl termed the existential vacuum.
Yes, the existential vacuum. He saw it as the signature psychological malaise of modern times, and maybe even more relevant today. It's characterized by profound emptiness, boredom, apathy, aimlessness. We see it everywhere, don't we? Mm-hmm. People who are materially comfortable, yet desperately unhappy.
Yeah.
Seeking transient fixes through consumerism, excessive entertainment, maybe substance abuse, just to numb that void. The therapeutic solution, according to logotherapy, is not to prescribe happiness directly, but to guide the person toward proactively seeking specific, meaningful goals and taking responsibility for fulfilling them.
So getting active again.
Moving beyond the passive consumption of life and engaging in activities that involve contribution, self-transcendence, commitment to something larger than oneself.
This connects meaning directly back to philosophy and the concept of value. Our sources suggest that meaningfulness is fundamentally based on whether your life contains sufficient worth or value. A meaningless life is simply one lacking enough valuable aspects. Like, I don't know, a famous writer who wakes up one day and wonders, so what? Why did I even bother? That kind of feeling.
Exactly. And the sources provide a really powerful philosophical critique of why so many people struggle with this feeling of meaninglessness. They identified common conceptual errors people make when evaluating the worth of their own lives. These errors act as psychological hurdles, really, that prevent them from recognizing or cultivating the value that might already exist or could exist.
Okay, let's dive into these mistakes about value. These sound critical for the listener who thinks, I've tried finding meaning and I just can't see the worth.
The first mistake is the assumption of certainty. People often assume that their strong, immediate, visceral impression that their life is meaningless is a precise, reliable, almost scientific assessment. It feels like a solid fact.
Like, I feel it, therefore it must be true.
Pretty much. But meaning is a sphere of value, just like judging one's own skill level at chess or assessing the quality of your relationships or even your own sense of humor. In everyday life, we are frequently mistaken in judging our own competence, humor, or parenting skills, right? We underrate or overrate ourselves all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
So, if we often get it wrong in those areas, why would we assume our assessment of our life's overall value is suddenly infallible?
That's fascinating. You're saying the feeling of meaninglessness might just be, well, a mistaken self-assessment, like getting your own skill level wrong.
Precisely. The takeaway here is crucial. You shouldn't accept your strong internal impression of meaninglessness as absolute proof. It's a feeling that demands inquiry, double-checking, examination. You need to question the standards you are applying to your life. Are they realistic? Are they fair? Are you unconsciously comparing your internal reality to someone else's curated external image, maybe on social media?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah. Meaning is a dynamic sphere for exploration, not a static, certain calculation.
Okay, so challenge the certainty. What's the second mistake?
The second mistake is believing. The condition is constant. This is the fatalistic error where people assume the current low degree of meaning is an unchangeable fixed state. This is just how it is, and always will be.
The stuck feeling.
Exactly. This assumption is the enemy of action. If meaning is tied to value, then the degree of meaning in life can absolutely be increased or decreased. We have immense agency here. We can actively enhance the value in our lives in, say, 3 main ways.
Okay.
First, by importing new value. This is the process of dedicating time and effort to a new pursuit, like volunteering, starting a creative project, learning a difficult skill, bringing something new and valuable in. Second, by augmenting existing value. This means taking an aspect of your life that is already valuable, say your role as a mentor or a relationship, and dedicating more effort, time, or attention to it, making it bigger, deeper, more profound.
Okay, adding new or enhancing the old. And the third, you called it something like detrivializing and resensitizing ourselves to existing value. That sounds a bit more subtle.
It is subtle, but maybe the most powerful. It means recognizing the worth that is already there, but which we've stopped seeing or appreciating. It's like the taking off the wallpaper phenomena, you know? When you move into a house, you notice the beautiful details of the wallpaper. After 6 months, it becomes invisible background noise.
Yeah, you just stop seeing it.
The value hasn't decreased. Your awareness of it has dulled due to familiarity. Gratitude practices, for instance, are essentially tools for resensitizing you to the profound value of your morning coffee, your health, the simple reliability of having a roof over your head.
So, actively choosing to notice the value that's been there all along but got taken for granted.
Precisely. Actively combating that familiarity blindness.
Okay, and finally, the third common mistake. The need for uniqueness. This is the belief that for a life to be truly meaningful, it must be singular, original, maybe unprecedented. It has to stand out from everyone else's story.
This is a huge psychological hurdle, often exacerbated by hyperconnectivity and social media, I think. People feel they must find their unique purpose that no one else has. If they're doing something similar to someone else, they dismiss its worth.
Oh, everyone does that.
Yeah, the comparison trap again.
Totally. Yeah. But we have to recognize that in the vast majority of human endeavors, value does not depend on being different from everyone else. Is a mother's love for her child less valuable because millions of other mothers love their children? Of course not. The worth is in the warmth, the commitment, the emotional closeness of the act itself.
Good point.
Is the value of dedicating time to helping others through a community project diminished because there are thousands of similar projects globally? Absolutely not. The value is in the act of helping, the connection, the impact, regardless of its uniqueness.
So insisting on uniqueness is often just. Maybe vanity disguised as philosophical searching. It stops us from seeing the value in common shared human experiences. It can be, yeah. It prevents us from recognizing the profound shared value in simple, universal human virtues. Honesty, loyalty, kindness, compassion, shared experience. It can become a self-imposed prison, really.
Okay, so by tackling these three errors, challenging the certainty of meaninglessness, recognizing that meaning can change, and dropping the need for uniqueness, the door opens to proactively building a life rich in verifiable value.
Exactly. It shifts the power back to you.
Frankl gives us that crucial existential foundation, the why, by centering us on purpose and value. Now let's shift gears a bit to the science, the concrete how of fostering that balance. And that lands us squarely in modern positive psychology. This field fundamentally changed the conversation in psychology, didn't it? Shifting focus from just diagnosing and treating illness to actively cultivating strengths, virtues, and psychological flourishing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the practical application of this shift is the use of positive psychology interventions, or PPIs. These are evidence-based techniques. They're measurable, replicable, and have been shown to work. They're designed to do more than just manage distress. They actively enhance psychological functioning and quality of life. Think of them as like preventative medicine for the soul.
Preventative medicine for the soul. I like that.
They build resilience and provide a psychological buffer against the development of common mental health disorders like chronic anxiety and depression. It's proactive well-being.
It's the difference between waiting for a fever to happen and proactively boosting your immune system, maybe. What are the key mechanisms at play? What makes PPIs so powerful?
Well, their mechanisms are multifaceted. On a cognitive level, they can help rewire our attention bias. We naturally tend to focus on threats, the negative. PPIs help us focus more on positive information. That's a crucial step away from anxiety spirals.
Okay, changing focus.
On an emotional level, they enhance our ability to regulate strong feelings. Socially, they strengthen relationships by fostering empathy and connection. And increasingly, research shows they affect physiological functioning too, lowering stress hormones like cortisol, improving cardiovascular health. They seem to activate the brain's reward centers in a healthy, sustainable way.
Okay, so mind, emotions, relationships, even body. It's quite holistic. Let's dive into specific, scientifically proven interventions, the tools the listener can start using today to promote this proactive well-being. We should probably start with the heavyweight champion, gratitude exercises. This is more than just, feeling thankful occasionally, isn't it?
Oh, much more. It's really a cognitive redirection exercise. Activities like keeping a structured gratitude journal, maybe listing 3 good things that happened each day and why they happened.
The why is important.
Yes, the why helps you analyze and internalize the positive experience. Or writing letters of gratitude, even if you don't send them. Or simply expressing verbal appreciation more often. These practices consistently show measurable increases in positive affect and life satisfaction in studies. The mechanism here is that it deliberately interrupts the brain's natural negativity bias. Like we said, we're hardwired to notice threats, the negative stuff, and help to survive. But it means we often miss the stable good things, the positive backdrop of life.
Right, the things we take for granted.
Exactly. Gratitude forces us to step back and resensitize ourselves to those existing values we discussed earlier. Studies show that participants who engage in these exercises for just a few weeks experienced not only higher life satisfaction, but also reported fewer physical symptoms and felt more optimistic about the future. Pretty powerful for a simple practice.
Okay, gratitude. Then we shift from appreciation to application with strengths-based interventions. Most therapy focuses on fixing what's broken. This sounds like it focuses on leveraging what's already strong.
Absolutely right. The framework, heavily researched by folks like Peterson and Seligman, involves first identifying your core character strengths. Are you high in perseverance, creativity, kindness, fairness, humor, leadership? There's a whole list.
So know yourself first.
Yes. And then the intervention part is intentionally finding new and unique ways to use those strengths in your daily life. The intervention works because when you utilize a core strength, you often enter a state of flow, engagement, and authenticity. It just feels right. And that naturally promotes feelings of competence and self-worth.
Can you give an example?
Sure, if you know your strength is kindness, you might intentionally use it to mentor a colleague who seems to be struggling, or make a point of doing small favors throughout the day. The goal isn't self-improvement via weakness correction, but rather leveraging your innate best qualities to promote flourishing, using what you've got.
Makes sense. Next up, positive effect interventions, the active component of doing good, which ties back really nicely into Frankl's idea of contribution, doesn't it?
It really does. This primarily involves engaging in acts of kindness and altruism. And we're not necessarily talking grand gestures or huge charitable donations here. It's more about intentional, often simple acts, like paying for the coffee for the person behind you in line, or helping a neighbor carry their groceries, or offering genuine praise to someone. Research has shown that when participants are instructed to perform, say, 5 acts of kindness per week, their subjective well-being increases significantly.
Why does doing something for someone else make us feel better?
Well, a few reasons. It pulls us out of self-absorption, which is often the breeding ground for anxiety and low mood. When you focus on helping others, you interrupt that internal monologue of worry. Furthermore, giving and helping triggers the brain's reward system. It releases feel-good neurochemicals like dopamine and oxytocin, providing a positive feedback loop that reinforces the behavior. It basically proves to your brain that investing positive action in the world results in a positive return on your own happiness.
The helper's high?
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
A sustainable version of it.
Okay. And finally, the foundational practice that often seems to underpin many of these, mindfulness-based practices.
Yes, mindfulness, the practice of cultivating present moment awareness with non-judgmental acceptance. This is absolutely critical for shifting from that reactive being to a conscious one we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
When we are caught up in rumination about the past or worry about the future, we're essentially living in a state of low awareness, disconnected from reality. Mindfulness, typically rooted in practices like meditation or just mindful breathing, pulls us back to the only reality we ever actually experience, right here, right now.
It sounds simple, but it's hard. The mind wanders.
The mind is supposed to wander. That's its job. Mindfulness isn't about stopping thoughts. Studies repeatedly demonstrate that mindfulness reduces the stress hormone cortisol, lowers anxiety, and can significantly decrease depressive symptoms. It teaches us to observe thoughts as transient mental events, like clouds passing in the sky, not as absolute truths or commands we must obey or get swept away by.
Changing your relationship to your thoughts. I think the wide applicability is what makes these PPIs so potentially powerful. They seem scalable and accessible.
Indeed. They are definitely not restricted to a clinical setting, which is key. PPIs have been shown to be effective across the lifespan, from helping children manage emotions better in schools to aiding older adults in maintaining cognitive health and social connection. Their relatively low cost and ease of implementation make them valuable tools for prevention in educational settings, corporate wellness programs, even public health initiatives.
And they don't replace therapy if someone needs it.
Not at all. They complement traditional therapy, like CBT or medication. They give individuals tools to manage symptoms and focus on building strengths alongside other treatments. It's an additive approach.
Looking ahead, we noted some future research directions for PPIs. For the listener who's maybe actively using some of these tools, gratitude journals, mindfulness apps, why should they care about where the science is heading next? What improvements are researchers working on that might make their practice even better?
That's a great framing. If you're investing time in these practices, you naturally want to know they are truly worth the effort long-term, right? Currently, much of the research focuses on the immediate or short-term benefits. We desperately need more robust longitudinal studies research that follows people for years, even decades, to assess the long-term effectiveness and sustained impact. If we know the benefits of a daily gratitude practice reliably last 5 or 10 years, that dramatically changes how institutions might invest in promoting these programs.
Right, proof of long-term value.
Exactly. Another crucial area is cultural adaptation. A gratitude practice that works really well for someone in a highly individualistic culture, say the US, might need significant retooling for someone in a more collectivist culture, perhaps in East Asia. For example, if an intervention designed in the West relies heavily on individual self-disclosure in talking about personal achievements, it might fail entirely or even be counterproductive in cultures where modesty and group harmony are prioritized.
So making them work for everyone, everywhere.
Researchers are working hard to ensure these tools are relevant and effective globally, tailoring the delivery and content to fit local values and norms. It's not one size fits all.
And finally, the technology and neuroscience aspect. If I use a meditation app, how is research helping that experience get better?
Technology-based interventions, like mobile apps or online programs, are obviously crucial for accessibility and scale. Researchers are using neuroscientific studies, employing advanced tools like fMRI or EEG neuroimaging to understand the biological basis of well-being. They can literally see which brain circuits are strengthened by kindness practices, or how meditation changes brain connectivity over time.
Wow, so they can see it working in the brain.
Yes, and this level of detail allows developers and researchers to fine-tune apps and interventions. They can make them hyper-personalized potentially and maximally effective at targeting the specific neural mechanisms linked to resilience and positive emotion. It moves us from "this practice seems to work" to understanding why and how it works at a biological level, which helps refine it.
Okay, we've established the philosophical grounding and meaning with Frankl and the scientific backing for proactive, positive habits with PPIs. Now, let's move to the really tactical level, the concrete, daily tools we can deploy when life inevitably throws us off course when the chaos hits. And we find incredible wisdom here in Stoicism, an ancient Greek and Roman philosophy that offers a profound toolkit for managing our inner response to external chaos.
Absolutely. Stoicism, which flourished over 2,000 years ago, with thinkers like Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. It offers strategies that are remarkably relevant today. In fact, they often anticipate key elements of modern cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. The core instruction is beautifully simple, though hard to master. Focus your energy where you actually have power. It's a philosophy dedicated to practical living and, very much, to anxiety reduction. Hashtag 3.1, the Stoic Toolkit for External Stress. The single most important Stoic concept, arguably the cornerstone, championed by thinkers like Seneca and Epictetus, is the dichotomy of control. This requires us to rigorously divide all life events into two distinct categories. Things we can control, which are essentially our judgments, our voluntary actions, our responses, our will, and everything else, which is ultimately uncontrollable.
Everything else being a lot.
A lot. Other people's opinions of us, the outcome of an election, the weather, whether you get stuck in traffic, future events in general, our health to a large degree, our reputation, the list is long.
And anxiety. You said earlier, anxiety is fundamentally the gap between what we want to control and what we actually can control. So focusing our psychic energy on the uncontrollable what-ifs is basically a guarantee of suffering.
That's the Stoic diagnosis, yes.
Yeah.
When you fixate on the uncontrollable future, especially negative possibilities, you are suffering now before the negative event has even occurred, if it ever does. Seneca's famously warned against this, saying something like, "He suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary," wasting energy on projected pain.
So the practice is constant vigilance.
It's a constant, rigorous practice of asking yourself in any situation causing distress, is this within my sphere of influence? Is this up to me? If the answer is no, the practice is to consciously work on letting go of the internal energy drain, the desire to control it. If the answer is yes, you immediately shift focus to planning productive action. What can I do?
That sounds simple on paper, but it's profoundly difficult to implement when we're emotionally triggered, right? Our minds constantly try to trick us into believing we can control others' perceptions of us or force a specific future outcome if we just worry enough.
Oh, absolutely. It requires daily, hourly practice. Consider getting stuck in traffic. You cannot control the volume of cars, the timing of the lights, or the accident up ahead. Focusing on the anger or frustration is utterly useless. It just makes you miserable.
Wasted energy.
Totally. What you can control is your attitude in the car. Choosing to listen to a podcast, practice some deep breathing, reframe the delay as unexpected quiet time, or simply accept the delay as an inevitable part of urban life. The power lies in making that internal shift from external complaint to internal choice. Another critical Stoic practice, and one that's often misunderstood, is amor fati. It translates roughly to love of fate.
Love your fate. That sounds passive, like just accepting whatever bad stuff happens.
It's often misinterpreted as passive fatalism, but it's anything but. It is cultivating a profound acceptance, even potentially an appreciation for everything that happens, seeing all events, the good, the bad, the ugly, as necessary, woven fibers in the unique tapestry of your specific life.
Okay, but how do we reconcile this love of fate with genuine suffering? How do you love a situation that is actively painful or deeply unjust? Where do we draw the line between this kind of acceptance and just rolling over?
That's the crucial distinction, and the Stoics weren't advocating for apathy. Amorphite does not require you to pretend you like the pain or the injustice. It doesn't mean saying, oh good, I lost my job.
Yeah.
It requires you to recognize the event's reality and its necessity in this moment, meaning it has happened, it is the current reality. You accept that this event, painful as it is now part of the material you have to work with.
Okay, accepting the reality of it.
Yes. And if the situation is unjust, acceptance of its current reality does not preclude taking ethical action to fight that injustice, if changing it is within your control, back to the dichotomy. But amorphati removes that futile inner layer of anger and resistance against what already is. That resistance only drains your energy. It transforms rage against reality into clarity, allowing you to respond from a place of resilience and reason, not just raw, ineffective anger.
So, accept the reality, then act if action is possible and appropriate.
Precisely. Then there is the counterintuitive tool that often sounds alarming to newcomers. Negative visualization, or premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Basically, mentally preparing for the worst-case scenario.
My initial reaction to that, and I suspect many listeners, is doesn't that just invite bad energy? Isn't that just pessimism or creating a self-fulfilling prophecy? How did the Stoics argue against that interpretation?
It's a common reaction. But the Stoics argued, quite persuasively I think, that the pain of uncertain expectation is often far worse than the pain of reality, even a harsh reality. Anxiety, remember, is largely fueled by uncertainty about the future, by mentally rehearsing potential challenges in a calm, rational way. Say, vividly imagining losing your job or having a public presentation go badly or getting sick. You're essentially inoculating yourself against the shock and emotional collapse if those things actually happen.
Like a fire drill for bad events.
Exactly like that. It's a resilience training exercise performed in a controlled mental environment. When you confront the worst-case scenario head-on in your mind, you often realize two things. First, that it is probably survivable, maybe difficult, but survivable. And second, you start to mentally or even physically formulate a plan for how you would handle it. The potential outcome loses some of its terrifying amorphous power. It doesn't invite negativity. It removes the paralyzing fear of the unknown by making it known, at least mentally. It's an act of preparation, not prediction or invitation.
Preparation, not pessimism.
Okay.
And to gain perspective on those challenges, whether imagined or real, the Stoics offered the view from above. This sounds like an exercise in mental scale.
It is. It's a radical detachment technique, really powerful. You mentally zoom out from your immediate worries. You visualize yourself, then your house, your neighborhood, your city,
Keep going.
your country, the continent, the Earth floating in space, the solar system, the galaxy. You see the vastness of space and the immense sweep of time, past and future. The effect, when done well, can be almost immediate. Those small, seemingly overwhelming worries, the social anxiety about a party, the trivial slight from a colleague, the minor setback in a project, are dramatically diminished in importance.
They shrink.
They shrink. They become tiny, transient moments within the grand, vast scheme of things. This practice naturally diminishes the ego's tendency to overinflate the importance of daily problems. It moves you toward what the Stoics called ataraxia, or tranquil imperturbability. It reminds you that most of what you stress intensely about today probably won't matter much in a week, let alone a year or a century. Perspective.
Okay, philosophy provides the framework, the mindset. But sometimes the chaos is internal and instantaneous, like panic rising right now. We need an immediate off-ramp. That brings us to techniques for returning to what our sources call the oasis of calmness.
Yes. When we are overwhelmed or panicked, our nervous system gets hijacked by the sympathetic fight, flight, or freeze response. The goal of mindfulness and specific breathing techniques is to consciously activate the parasympathetic rest and digest system, the body's natural calming mechanism. As we touched on with PPIs, the mind is designed to produce thoughts. It's a thought-making machine. Meditation and mindfulness are not about stopping the thoughts that's impossible. It's about changing your relationship with them.
Observing, not engaging.
Observing without judgment, yes. Allowing them to drift by like clouds rather than jumping onto each anxious thought train and riding it into a spiral. And the breath. The breath is our most constant, reliable, physiological anchor to the present moment. It's always there, which is why conscious breathing is so central to achieving immediate calm.
Let's focus on one specific technique mentioned, the 4-step breathing technique, sometimes called box breathing. What's the mechanism of this specific rhythm? Why the counting?
The specific, deliberate rhythm of the 4-step breath, typically inhale for a count of 4, hold the breath gently for 4, exhale slowly for 4, and then hold the breath out for 4, is designed to do several things quickly. It forces you to slow your heart rate and interrupts the shallow, rapid breathing typical of stress and panic. When you focus intently on the counting and the physical sensation of breathing, you prevent the mind from continuing its obsessive loop on the stressor.
The counting gives the mind something else to do.
Exactly. And holding the breath, particularly that gentle hold after the exhale, sends a physiological signal to your nervous system that you are safe, that the immediate danger has passed. It helps force a rapid shift out of the acute stress response. Practicing this for just 2 or 3 minutes can drastically lower your physiological arousal, allowing your body and mind to restore a sense of equilibrium.
Simple, portable, and effective. Another powerful quick anchor mentioned is the use of a simple personal mantra amidst the hustle.
Yes, a mantra can be incredibly grounding because it offers a singular point of focus and immediate psychological redirection. It cuts through the noise, the simple cadence, the repetition of a phrase like pause, breathe, heal, or even just calm or let go. It interrupts the momentum of panic or overwhelm.
Like hitting a reset button.
Kind of. The value is in creating an immediate micro break in the mental storm. You are making a conscious choice in that moment to prioritize internal peace over the external noise or internal chaos. It's a recognition, really, that tranquility isn't something you find after all the problems are solved. It's an ever-present resource deep within you that you simply need to choose to tap into, often via the breath or a simple word. It's realizing that peace is not an outcome achieved by fixing everything outside, but an inner choice available in every single moment, every breath. Now, journaling. This is the ultimate bridge, I think, between that ancient Stoic practice of self-reflection and modern psychological intervention. It's such a foundational practice. It promotes emotional balance, clarity, and growth because it forces the intangible swirling noise in our minds into tangible, manageable language on the page. You take the abstract and make it concrete.
Okay, but many people start journaling and quit almost immediately because their mind is just so noisy, they don't know where to begin. They feel like they're staring at a blank page while their brain is running a full marathon. What's the necessary first step for someone in that state?
That's a very common experience. When the mind is in that state, that mental washing machine cycle, just churning, the key first step is often what's called the mind dump. This phase is purely about volume, not quality or coherence. You just write down the anxious noise, the frantic thoughts, the snippets of your to-do list, the grievances bubbling up, the fear spirals, whatever is clamoring for attention. Just get it out onto the page until things begin to settle down a bit.
No editing, no judging.
Absolutely none. This is purely about getting the clutter out of your head. You shouldn't worry about grammar, making sense, or hurting anyone's feelings. It's private. You are decluttering the internal space. The sheer act of externalizing the noise prevents those thoughts from looping endlessly in your brain. Once the mind dump is complete, people often notice a significant drop in internal mental chatter, which then allows them to transition into more structured reflection if they want to.
So clear the static first. Then what are the benefits? Why keep doing it?
Journaling is incredibly powerful because, primarily, it enhances self-awareness. By seeing your thoughts and feelings written down over time, you start to uncover predictable patterns in your triggers, your reactions, your moods. You might start to see, every time I have a conflict with X, I feel Y, and then I tend to do Z.
Seeing the patterns.
That awareness is the absolutely essential first step toward developing healthier coping mechanisms. It also fosters emotional healing. Giving some kind of narrative structure to past emotional pain, writing about it, allows you to process it and integrate it rather than just reliving the raw, unprocessed emotion over and over. It helps you make sense of it.
Okay, so after the clutter is out, we can maybe shift to using structured prompts to gain perspective. What are some of the most effective daily prompts for enhancing clarity and maybe building on those PPIs?
The 3 you mentioned from the outline are excellent because they are focused on proactive alignment and value assessment, connecting back to Frankl and positive psychology. First, what excited me today? Or what gave me energy? By listing what brought you energy, joy, flow, or satisfaction, you identify patterns of things you value, things that nourish you. Then you can intentionally try to cultivate more of those things in future days. This is how you proactively build value.
Finding the positive energy sources.
Exactly. Second, the flip side. What drained me of energy? This is the essential triage step. You list what makes you feel sad, annoyed, frustrated, depleted, or resentful. Once it's externalized, you can analyze it. Was this drain necessary, like a difficult but important work task, or was it optional, like spending too much time with a perpetually negative person? Then you can strategize. Can I minimize this drain, avoid it, or if it's necessary, how can I compensate for it, or build in recovery time?
Taking control of the energy leaks.
Precisely. And third, back to gratitude. What am I grateful for? And here, specificity is key. This is the active, specific resensitization exercise we talked about. It's not enough to just say, I'm grateful for my health. That's too abstract. It needs to be specific. I am grateful for the 15 minutes of warm sunlight I felt on my face during my walk this morning, which felt really grounding. Or I'm grateful for the funny text message my friend sent that made me laugh out loud. Anchoring appreciation in those specific, often mundane details reinforces the value that already exists in your daily life. It makes it real.
Okay, those 3 prompts cover energy gains, energy drains, and appreciation. And we can integrate this journaling process directly with the Stoic principles we just discussed, right? To create a practical mental off-ramp when anxiety starts spiraling.
Absolutely. It's a perfect marriage. When you are feeling overwhelmed by anxiety, you can turn that feeling into a structured written exercise right then and there. You write down, okay, what is the specific thing troubling me right now? Get it clear. Then you explicitly apply the dichotomy of control. Is this thing actually within my control, or is it ultimately beyond my direct influence? Be honest. If the answer is yes, there are aspects within my control, the next step is action-oriented. What is the single smallest next achievable step I can take right now to address this? Break it down. If the answer is no, this is largely or entirely beyond my control, like worrying about a past event or someone else's decision, this step is acceptance and refocusing. How can I choose to let go of the pressure to control this uncontrollable thing and instead focus my energy on my chosen response, my attitude, or on other things that are within my control?
So it converts that vague, consuming anxiety into concrete analysis and immediate manageable steps, whether internal or external.
Exactly. It's a way to stop the spiral and regain a sense of agency, even if the only thing you control is your internal response.
Okay, we've built this really powerful framework, meaning provides the direction, Frankl, positive psychology provides the habits, PPIs, and Stoicism provides the resilience tools. Now we address maybe the highest level of agency of the stories we tell, both the internal stories we tell about ourselves and the external stories we tell about the world and others. Our narrative is like the filter through which we interpret and apply all of these practices.
That's a great way to put it. And this brings us squarely into the therapeutic realm of narrative therapy, pioneered primarily by Michael White and David Epstein. The core belief is incredibly transformative.
Yeah.
Our identity is not fixed or determined by our problems or our past traumas. Instead, we are defined by the stories we choose to live by, and crucially, how we interpret our experiences, the meaning we make. Often, individuals seeking help are living inside what White and Epstein called problem-saturated stories. Their entire identity becomes fused with their struggles. I am depressed, I am a failure, I am an anxious person.
The problem becomes who they are.
Exactly. And this creates a profound sense of hopelessness, because if the problem is you, fundamentally, how can you ever escape it? It feels like fighting yourself.
So what's the key tool they use to break this fusion? You mentioned the technique of externalizing problems.
Yes, this is the game changer in narrative therapy. Externalizing problems involves using language to consciously separate the individual from the issue they are facing. So instead of saying, I am an anxious person, the shift might be to saying, I am a person who is currently experiencing anxiety, or anxiety is trying to take over right now. Even more powerfully, sometimes you might talk about the overwhelm, or the inner critic, or the procrastinator, almost as if it were a separate character or an external force operating on you, rather than being you.
That subtle shift in language sounds incredibly important. Why is separating the person from the problem so effective? What does it achieve?
It immediately grants the individual a position of agency relative to the problem. If the overwhelm is an external entity, or at least conceptualized that way, you can observe it. You can talk back to it. You can notice its patterns, its tricks, its triggers. You can develop strategies to resist it or diminish its influence.
You can relate to it rather than be it.
Precisely. If the problem is you, you are locked in battle against yourself, which is a fight you can never truly win. Externalization makes the issue feel more manageable, potentially temporary, and crucially, separate from your intrinsic self-worth. It allows you to recognize that you are a complex, multi-storied human being, not defined solely by your current struggle. You have other stories, other identities, strengths, values. This reauthoring process, as they call it, is essential for recovery and growth. It helps clients reframe their identity beyond those problem-saturated stories to envision a preferred future, a future where the overwhelm or anxiety has much less influence. It empowers them to shift focus from past trauma, the story they perhaps can't change, to their present capabilities and resources, the story they can rewrite moving forward.
And the power of these new preferred narratives is often magnified when they are shared with others.
Absolutely. The connectedness fostered through sharing stories, whether that's in a formal therapy group, a peer support setting, or even just with a trusted friend who gets it, massively reduces isolation. When someone else says, "Yes, I know that character, the overwhelm, it visits me too," it provides immense validation and solidarity. It transitions what might feel like a deeply personal, isolating, shameful experience into a shared collective human struggle, which is inherently empowering.
And journaling in this context.
Journaling fits perfectly here. It's simply a private form of externalizing. You can have conversations with anxiety on the page, map its influence, discover moments where you resisted it, and explore and strengthen those alternative preferred narratives independently.
Okay, so if our personal narratives hold this incredible power over our internal freedom and well-being, that power comes with a profound responsibility when we shift to telling the stories of others, especially when the goal is to inspire collective action, like in advocacy work or fundraising for really noble causes. This brings us to the challenge of ethical storytelling.
Yes, this is a critical area. Nonprofits, charities, advocacy groups often walk this perpetual tightrope. They need to craft narratives that evoke empathy, convey urgency, and inspire action. They have to communicate what's at stake, why support is needed, but they must do so without exploiting the vulnerability of the people whose stories they are sharing, often called beneficiaries, or manipulating the compassion of their potential donors or supporters. The pressure to achieve a persuasive outcome, to meet fundraising targets, often risks eroding those crucial ethical boundaries.
It's a delicate balance. Let's start with the things we must actively avoid. The manipulative techniques or pitfalls that undermine trust and dignity. What are the big don'ts?
The first is fundamental. Don't sensationalize suffering. There's often a temptation, especially when facing donor fatigue, to use the most desperate, extreme imagery or narrative details to shock people into paying attention or giving money. Poverty porn, essentially. But overhyping the severity or focusing only on the bleakest aspects risks losing the long-term trust of your audience. More importantly, it disrespects the person whose story it is. The ethical shift must be from evoking pity to fostering partnership and empathy.
Empathy over pity. Can you explain that difference?
Pity often implies looking down on someone, feeling sorry for them from a position of superiority. Empathy is about trying to understand and connect with the other person's experience from their perspective, recognizing shared humanity. Sympathy can carry a tone of condescension or othering. Empathy builds connection and respects dignity. The goal should be connection, not making the donor feel sorry for someone less fortunate. Second, and critically important for inclusive and just advocacy, don't perpetuate negative stereotypes or harmful tropes. Storytelling must always strive to focus on the individual's complexity, agency, and unique circumstances, never reducing a person or a community to a predefined, often harmful label or a stereotype of need. For example, the helpless victim.
How does this play out in practice?
For instance, if an organization is using data to illustrate need, they must be incredibly careful to avoid aggregating data in ways that obscure the specific experiences of marginalized groups or reinforce harmful stereotypes. Instead of focusing solely on shared demographic characteristics like race or ethnicity, which can easily trigger existing biases, the sources emphasize focusing on shared environmental experiences, like using zip codes perhaps, to spotlight the challenging community conditions individuals might share, regardless of background. The goal is always to convey complexity and dignity, challenging harmful assumptions by showing the full tapestry of individual and community experience.
Got it. Avoid stereotypes. Focus on nuance. And the third major manipulation tactic you flagged is fear-mongering. I want to spend a moment here because you mentioned this links back to a specific cognitive bias in our source material. Prospect theory. What is prospect theory and how does it play into manipulative storytelling?
Right. Prospect theory, established by Nobel laureates Kahneman and Tversky, is a foundational principle in behavioral economics that reveals how people actually make decisions under conditions of risk or uncertainty. Critically, it posits that people are significantly more motivated to avoid losses than they are to acquire equivalent gains. The psychological pain of losing $100 feels much stronger, much more potent than the pleasure of gaining $100. We are loss-averse.
Okay, losses loom larger than gains. How is that exploited?
Well, ethical storytelling often needs to convey the stakes. What could genuinely be lost if we don't act? The negative consequences of inaction. That's legitimate. Fear-mongering, however, is the manipulative perversion of this. It preys on base, fear, and panic, deliberately exploiting that prospect theory bias by focusing only on catastrophic loss scenarios, often exaggerated, to force an immediate, emotional, often irrational reaction.
Pushing the panic button.
Exactly. While conveying legitimate urgency is sometimes necessary, pushing people to act solely out of fear, bypassing rational deliberation in favor of emotional coercion, erodes long-term trust and is ethically unsound. It treats the audience as pawns to be panicked, not partners to be informed.
Okay, so those are the big pitfalls to avoid. Sensationalizing suffering, perpetuating stereotypes, and fear-mongering. What then are the clear, actionable do's of ethical storytelling that maintain dignity and integrity?
The absolute foundation is being respectful. The ethical storyteller must prioritize the privacy, dignity, and agency of the protagonist, the person whose story is being told, above the organization's communication or fundraising goals. Always. This means obtaining explicit, informed consent for every element of the story used. Names, specific details, images, videos. Consent needs to be ongoing, not a one-off checkbox. If anonymity is requested or needed for safety, identifying characteristics must be carefully altered to protect the person. And most importantly, always factor in sufficient time for the protagonist to review, approve, and request edits to the story before it goes public. This ensures their experience is represented accurately and with the dignity they deserve. They get the final say on their own story.
Putting the person first. What else?
Second, be inclusive. We must actively challenge the power dynamics that are often inherent in storytelling. Who gets to speak, whose story gets prioritized, who is telling the story. Organizations must consciously aim for a truly representative range of experiences in their collective storytelling. This means actively seeking out and amplifying marginalized voices, ensuring the collection of stories reflects the actual diversity of the community being served, and challenging tokenism using one story to superficially represent an entire group. It's about showing a rich tapestry, not a monochromatic blob.
Right. And finally, be responsible. What does that entail?
This covers several things. It means being transparent about how the story will be used, being meticulously accurate in representing facts and context, and being authentic, avoiding manufactured narratives. Crucially, storytellers must anticipate the potential negative impact the narrative could have, not just on the audience, but on the people involved in the story, their families or their communities. And if the story involves trauma, violence, or deep struggle, it is responsible practice to consider using content warnings or trigger warnings to allow the audience to make an informed choice about engagement, and crucially, to prevent the potential re-traumatization of survivors in the audience, and perhaps even the protagonists themselves when they encounter their story later.
So responsibility means considering potential harm.
Yes. The litmus test for the ethical storyteller boils down to two simple questions they must constantly ask themselves. Am I putting the person and their dignity first and the struggle second? The answer must always be yes. And am I being manipulative, exploitative, or dishonest in any way? The answer must always be no. #outro.
This has been an incredibly integrated deep dive. We started with that fundamental philosophical pursuit of meaning with Frankl, moved through the science of establishing proactive, positive habits with PPIs, applied the practical resilience toolkit of Stoicism, and finally landed on the profound power and responsibility of shaping our internal and external narratives. It feels like we have a complete framework now.
And what ties every single section together, from Frankl's insistence on choosing our attitude, to the Stoic acceptance of the uncontrollable, to the mindful breath, to rewriting our stories, is that central idea of regaining agency, inner freedom. The sources suggest that cultivating higher awareness, moving towards that conscious being state, isn't necessarily a destination you suddenly arrive at. It's more like an inevitable direction of growth once you start engaging with these ideas. The transition from being primarily reactive to becoming more conscious is often characterized by what some traditions call the release phase.
It's a release phase. What's that?
It's perhaps less about doing more and more about allowing the accumulated past momentum of imbalance, the old low awareness habits, the negative self-talk loops, the chronic stress patterns to naturally dissipate as you bring more awareness to them. It's the moment you stop fighting so hard against the reality of the present moment, even if it's uncomfortable. You allow things to be as they are, internally, without adding that layer of resistance.
And the inner freedom that results, it isn't the absence of difficult emotions, is it? But maybe independence from their overwhelming influence.
Exactly that. Inner freedom isn't about feeling happy all the time or never feeling fear or anger. It's the growing capacity to observe those overwhelming emotions and thoughts, the fear, the anxiety, the anger, the craving, without feeling compelled to automatically act on them or completely identify with them. It's the capacity to allow them to be there, to pass through you, without succumbing entirely to the pressure of their influence. This freedom is rooted in wisdom, awareness, and acceptance, not in forceful suppression or naive reaction.
So, finding calm and balance isn't about achieving some static state of perfection or conforming to an idealized lifestyle we see online. It's much more about those small, conscious, moment-by-moment choices.
Exactly.
To breathe when stressed, to pause before reacting, to choose presence over mental pressure, to choose inquiry, is this true, is this helpful, over blind certainty, and to choose acceptance of what is over futile resistance against reality. It's about grounding yourself in reality, isn't it? Embracing its light and its dark aspects equally, perhaps.
Beautifully put. And this brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider drawing from the deeper implications of this material. Some philosophical and psychological perspectives suggest that once higher awareness, that true taste of inner freedom, that conscious presence, is genuinely triggered or experienced, even briefly, there is no possibility of true permanent regression back to total unawareness. There might be temporary suppression, falling back into old patterns.
Forgetting, maybe.
Forgetting. Distraction. Yeah. You can certainly attempt to numb or distract yourself with those existential vacuum fillers we talked about, overworking, excessive consumption, endless escapism. But eventually, that seed of awareness, once planted, will tend to reassert itself. Evolution, in a sense, is an unstoppable forward movement of consciousness, however slow or meandering the path might feel. So, knowing that the journey toward balance, meaning, and inner freedom is arguably an unstoppable forward movement deep down, and that any perceived suppression or step back is merely a temporary detour on your inevitable path to greater awareness. What is the one small conscious choice you can make today, right now or later today, to intentionally move forward on that path? Just one small thing.
Think about that single intentional step. The mindful breath you can take right now, the limiting thought you can question, the small existing value you can consciously notice and appreciate, the choice to respond rather than react, and make the choice that aligns with that deeper, growing conscious self, a truly powerful thought to sit with. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We hope this framework provides you with the clarity and tools needed to navigate your own chaos with a bit more purpose.